My 8-year-old daughter needed life-saving surgery. I asked her rich father for money. Right in front of her, he said, "You should have aborted. You get nothing from me." I didn't cry. I did this. Now my daughter is happy and healthy, and my ex's life fell apart. I stood on the front steps of an expensive private club, holding Maddie's hand so tight it felt like tomorrow depended on the strength of my fingers. Inside, music played. Laughter. Clinking glasses. Someone's congratulations. Everything people use to celebrate other people's good fortune. That night they were sending his father off into retirement. A big event. Big guests. Big money. And, as it turned out, a very small conscience. I shouldn't have been there. Normal people don't show up at someone else's party uninvited. Normal people don't drag a child up to the entrance of a closed event while holding a folder of medical records in the other hand. Normal people try not to end up in situations where the word life-saving is literal. But we hadn't had a normal life in a long time. The hostess looked me over like I'd brought a mess into their picture-perfect scene. "This is a private event," she said gently, with the kind of tone that means, "You don't belong here." "I know," I said. "I need Brandon Caldwell. 1 minute." She didn't move. "Without an invitation, we can't." I nodded. I understood. I had learned that language already, the language of doors closing in your face, the language of smiles that mean nothing, the language of people who have options and who love reminding you when you don't. Maddie stood beside me, quiet. An 8-year-old with big eyes and that too-adult habit of staying silent when the truth makes grown-ups uncomfortable. "Mom," she whispered. "It's okay," I said automatically. I hate that sentence. It means nothing. It's just noise parents make when they can't say the truth. The hostess disappeared, then came back a minute later, now visibly annoyed. "He's busy, and you don't have an invitation." I almost turned around. Almost. Then Maddie leaned into me, just a little, and I felt her fingers trembling. Not a tantrum, not tears, just a small shake, like a bird in your hands. Something inside me clicked, not loudly, not dramatically, just like a switch. "Tell him one thing," I said calmly. "There's a woman here, and she says the little girl next to her is his daughter." The hostess blinked, then blinked again. For a second her face turned human. "Wait here." She vanished. We stayed on the steps. I watched the glass doors and tried not to think about how people behind them were eating steak and laughing while my mind kept looping one word: surgery. A couple minutes later, the doors opened, and he walked out. Brandon looked the same, handsome, confident, loosely relaxed, like a man who's spent his whole life watching problems get solved with money or someone else's phone call. He wore an expensive suit that fit like it had been borne on his shoulders, a cigar in his hand. Yes, a cigar, because when you're rich, you can cosplay as a character from an old movie in the 21st century. He stopped when he saw us, and for a second he looked thrown. That second was enough for me to see it on his face. He understood. He didn't need a test. He didn't need my story. It felt like he needed one detail. Maddie's face, her brows, her chin, the exact expression she makes when she frowns, the one he makes too. He looked at her like someone had just handed him a bill for a dinner he didn't order. "You," he breathed, then flicked his eyes to me. "So you really had it." The words landed almost casually, like we weren't talking about a child but a package I'd picked up without a delivery slip. Maddie squeezed my hand harder. I swallowed. "She's your daughter, Brandon. She's 8. He gave a short, tight laugh. 8, he repeated, like he was tasting the number. "So what now? You need money?" Just like that. No how are you, no why, no what do you need. Straight to the point. Money. I nodded. Yes. How much? He asked, like we were negotiating over a used car. I opened the folder, not dramatically, not shaking, just opened it and showed him the first page. Black ink on white paper. Numbers. Deadlines. Diagnosis. His eyes slid over it, and the boredom arrived instantly. Listen, he said, exhaling smoke away from us. What are your claims here? You decided to keep it. I offered you another option, and by the way, I helped back then, so fair is fair. There's nothing you get from me. That's when I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was screaming. Fair is fair. He said it like fairness was a clause in a contract his father once signed on his behalf. I didn't come here to debate fairness, I said. I came for a chance for her. Maddie stood beside me, looking up at him. No excitement, no hope. Just watching. Like kids do when adults are doing something important and the kid doesn't know yet whether they'll ever be able to unsee it. She needs surgery, I went on. Urgently. Otherwise, I didn't say, otherwise she'll die. Not because I was scared of the truth, because you don't put that word next to a child when it's about the child. It's like striking glass. He tipped his head. Surgery. He drew it out. So she's sick too? He sounded almost relieved, as if the universe had handed him an excuse not to feel like a monster. And then, right there on the steps, 2 feet from my daughter, he said it. Calmly. Clearly. Without anger. Like a fact. You should have aborted. You get nothing from me. I felt Maddie flinch. The words were English, but the cruelty didn't need translating. Kids understand cruelty faster than grammar. I didn't cry, not because I'm strong, because I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Not then. Not in front of her. I closed the folder slowly. Got it, I said. He was already turning away, like he'd checked off a task. Denied. But I still added, quietly, level, no threats. I didn't come here for a war, Brandon. But if you think you can just disappear, I'll do it officially. Through the court. Paternity. Child support. Everything the way it works in this country. Not because I want a payoff. Because Maddie has a right. He stopped, shot me an irritated look. Gold diggers, he muttered, slipping into a familiar role. I've seen dozens of you. Then he looked at Maddie and gave a little smirk, like an idea had amused him. You know, he said almost cheerfully, when I have a kid with the woman I love, then I'll help. But this one? He waved a hand like he was dismissing a delivery he hadn't ordered. I don't know. And he walked back inside, to the congratulations and the photos, to the place where everything in his life was still fine. We stayed on the steps. Maddie was quiet. Then she tilted her face up and asked softly, Mom, is he really my dad? I looked at her and answered just as softly. Biologically, yes. But a dad is the one who stays. She nodded, like she already knew. We walked to the car. I held her hand and didn't look back once. I didn't cry. I did what mothers do when someone takes their air away. I turned pain into a to-do list. To understand why I even knew where to find Brandon, and why my child ended up standing on the steps of someone else's party, you have to go back to where it started. I moved to Columbus not because I dreamed of a big city. I moved because I had to go somewhere. My grandmother raised me, not helped, not watched me sometimes. Raised. Like you raise a tree in wind, propping it up, tying it off, sometimes cursing the weather. My parents weren't really in the picture. Grandma was everything. Home, discipline, first aid kit, and the one person who could say, "You'll make it," in a way that sounded like truth. I studied nursing and worked whatever I could. Night shifts, weekends, other people's demands, other people's blood, other people's pain. Strangely, all of that felt easier than dealing with my own life. I didn't like clubs, noise, crowds, strangers' bodies too close. I was the kind of girl friends dragged out saying, "You need to loosen up," and then acted surprised when you stood against the wall counting minutes to escape. That night, I was standing against the wall, and then he came over. Brandon was one of those men who looks like an advertisement: teeth, watch, confidence. He smiled like we already knew each other and were just deciding where to continue the evening. "You here alone?" he asked. I said yes and instantly felt stupid because every word near him sounded like I was taking a test I hadn't studied for. He suggested stepping outside for air, then a drive through the city at night. I agreed, not because I was easy, because he looked at me like no didn't exist in his world. We drove through the night streets and everything felt like a movie. Lights, music in the car, his hand on the wheel. He talked about himself easily and loudly, school, trips, how everything's handled. I remember saying something like, "You live so confidently," and he laughed. "Why wouldn't I? My dad..." And then he named a position the way some people say a password to every locked door. His father was a big name in the state's highway enforcement world, not just a cop. One of the guys at the top, someone who decided what happened to who. Brandon said it with the kind of pride some people use when they say, "I built it all myself." Only he hadn't built anything. He'd simply been born into the right family. "If anything happens, they'll always get me out," he said. "You have no idea." I did have an idea, and for some reason, it made me cold. He turned off the highway onto a quiet road outside the city. Fields, darkness, scattered lights. The kind of place where nobody asks questions because nobody sees. "It's beautiful out here," he said, and turned off the music. It was beautiful, in that wide, empty American way. Huge sky, earth smell, silence that presses against your ears. And that's where it happened. I'm not going to dress it up. It wasn't romantic. It was picast. Certain. On his terms. And the weirdest part was afterward he looked at me and genuinely seemed surprised. "You... serious?" he asked. "What? I'm your first?" I nodded and immediately regretted it. I wanted to rewind time and lie, not from shame, from self-defense. He smirked. "Never had that," he said, like someone had handed him a rare toy. Then he drove me home, took my number to be polite. I knew what it meant, but somewhere inside me, an idiotic little hope still lived. Maybe. We met up twice more, and those dates were a strange mix. He was warm exactly as long as he was interested. I looked at him the way you look at someone who suddenly feels like the meaning of things. And then he got bored. You can feel it. When someone's still there, but they're already somewhere else. When replies get shorter. When your messages get read but not answered. And one day he just disappeared. I called him. At first carefully, then more. Then with that anxious feeling where you don't want to sound desperate but panic is already living in your chest. "You okay?" I texted. "Everything all right?" Ringing. 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 Once I called, and a woman answered. "The Caldwell residence," she said calmly. "Residence. Not hello. Residence." I froze. I'm looking for Brandon." "He's gone," she said, like she was stating the weather. "Through the end of summer. Language program. The Caribbean." The Caribbean. While I was counting money for gas and wondering whether I could afford better medication for my grandmother, Brandon was improving his language skills on an island. Because his father wanted to slot him into some cushy future, and the son had to look the part. I hung up and sat down on my hallway floor. Not pretty, not dramatic, just sat. like my legs had stopped holding me. I cried for a week, quietly, into a pillow so Grandma wouldn't hear, because Grandma was already living at the edge of her strength. She would have understood, but I didn't want her to hurt for me. Then I pulled myself together. Stuff happens. Forget it. Move on. And I almost believed it. And then one morning I realized I hadn't had a normal one morning in a while. I had a late period. I tried to tell myself it was stress. I'm a medical person. I know things happen. I can rationalize. It's my talent. Explaining to myself what I don't want to admit. The test showed 2 lines. I stared at them and felt something roll over me. Not joy. Not horror. Something in between. And my first thought was absolutely stupid. This is a reason to see him again. Do you understand? I was so naive I treated pregnancy like a chance to talk. I waited for fall because they told me he'll be back at the end of summer. He came back. Just not to me. I called his number. He didn't pick up right away. When he did, he recognized me, and I think he was even a little pleased. He liked knowing someone remembered him. I told him I was pregnant. Silence. Then he said we should meet. A coffee shop near his campus, where he was studying to be a future lawyer, as his father loved to brag. I prepared for that meeting like a final exam, put on a dress that still fit, for now, light makeup. I arrived 30 minutes early and stared at the door like he might walk in and say something right. Brandon was late. He sat down and went straight to business. "Sorry this happened," he started. He could say sorry in a way that cost nothing, like an ATM, insert card, receive phrase. "I really hate that you're dealing with this," he continued, looking past me. "But how far along?" 11 weeks, I said. He nodded like I'd said 8 minutes. "We can still terminate," he said. I didn't even register the meaning immediately. "What?" "Don't drag it out," he said, already certain. "There are private Anderson clinics. They'll do it fast. Don't worry about the cost. I'll take you right now." I sat there and couldn't believe it. Over the summer, I'd gotten used to the idea that I was going to be a mother. I'd already started loving the tiny being inside me. I'd told Grandma. Grandma went quiet at first. Then she fussed and cried and took her heart drops. She wanted a different life for me. Yes. She dreamed I'd be happy in the normal way. But she didn't say, "Get rid of it." She said, "If it happened, we'll manage. Just don't count on him, honey." Back then, I still did. "I'm not doing that," I told Brandon. He didn't even get angry. He just got tired. Like I'd made his life more complicated. "Listen," he said, leaning forward. "You're choosing this, but I'm not participating." "It's your child," I whispered. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and put it on the table. "That's enough for the procedure," he said. "I did my part. From here on out, it's your responsibility." I stared at the envelope and felt sick. Not from pregnancy, from humiliation. I don't remember if I grabbed it right then or walked out and left it on the table. My head was static. I only remember one thing. When I stepped outside, the air was cold, and for the first time I was truly scared. Not for me. For the baby. Maddie was born in a regular city hospital. No VIP suite, no photographer and balloons. Just me, my grandmother, and a very tired doctor who'd seen hundreds of women like me. She was beautiful, tiny. And when they placed her on my chest, for the first time in a long time, I felt like something in the world was right. And then the doctor said words that knock the ground out from under even people who work in medicine. "Your baby has a congenital heart defect." It didn't require surgery right away. Right away. That phrase is just a delayed alarm. Otherwise, Maddie was healthy, warm. She smelled like milk. She grabbed my finger so hard it was like she was holding on to life and had no intention of letting go. My grandmother and I adored her. Money got funny, in the worst way. I couldn't work. The benefits were tiny. We counted everything, from diapers to gas. Grandma cut back on herself so much it made me angry. She could have bought decent groceries, but she bought Maddie a toy. And you know what's strange? Even in those months, I never seriously thought about going to Brandon. Not because I was proud, because I could hear his voice in my head. You chose this. It's your responsibility. And somewhere in me that toxic logic lived. If I decided to give birth, then I had no right to ask. Now that I'm older, I want to go back and slap my younger self. Not out of anger, out of pity, because it wasn't pride. It was being cornered. Maddie grew up not like a typical kid. She grew up like a little question mark. By 4, she was reading. By 5, she was doing math meant for second or third graders. She asked a million questions. Why blood is red, why planes don't fall, why people have different voices, why the heart beats like that. Sometimes I looked at her and thought, God, please let you always stay this alive. And sometimes, at night, when Maddie slept, I sat at the kitchen table and Googled her diagnosis, and it felt like I'd stopped breathing too. When Maddie started daycare, I could go back to work. I took nursing shifts nobody wanted. Grandma picked Maddie up, fed her, read books to her, taught her chess. Yes, chess. Maddie liked thinking. Life slowly started to settle. We even allowed ourselves small joys. Pizza on Fridays, a trip to the park, ice cream just because. And we almost believed that right away would stretch into years. But right away ended when Maddie turned 8. First, she tired faster. Then she complained more often about chest pain. Then one day, she just sat down on the school hallway floor and told her teacher she couldn't breathe right. I picked her up and drove straight to the doctor. The doctor looked at the results, then at me and said, "She needs surgery, soon." He named the cost. Even with insurance, even with payment plans, even with us doing everything right, it was money I'd never had in my life, and never could. I went pale. Not metaphorically. Actually, because in moments like that, your brain does one thing. It starts calculating what you can sell. A house? We didn't have one. A car? A drop in the ocean? A loan? Nobody would give me that kind of loan, and there wasn't time anyway. The doctor saw my face and added, "The hospital has assistance programs, charity care, fund support, community fundraising. A social worker will talk with you. We help families in these situations." I nodded, holding back tears, on autopilot. Then he said, "But sometimes fundraising takes months. And in your case, the sooner, the better." When we walked out, Maddie stayed brave. She asked, "Mom, are they going to cut me?" "They're going to fix you," I said. "And you're going to run faster than anyone." She tried to smile. It came out crooked. At home, I sat at the kitchen table and understood one thing. I needed a huge amount of money. Now. And I knew exactly who had it. Brandon. I didn't stalk him. I truly tried to live like he didn't exist. But Brandon was the kind of person you couldn't fully avoid. He was a local mini-celebrity. Parties, expensive cars, projects, photos by pools with drinks and headphones, the life is great grin. Even in his 30s, he had that habit of looking like a 20-year-old who thinks rules are for other people. He had everything that was fantasy to me. Multiple properties, a parent's house with a pool, money spent because it felt like it. And I had a little girl who might not live to the next school year. I opened a local news site and saw a headline. His father was retiring. Big reception, closed event, elite place, a perfect chance to speak. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'd do it again. That's how we ended up on those steps. I brought the diagnosis. I brought the numbers. I brought my child. I brought truth into a place that was built to live without it. And Brandon brought a cigar, confidence, and that abortion line. After his words, I wanted to curl up in the passenger seat and disappear. I wanted to cry until there was no air left. I wanted to... a lot of things. But Maddie was sitting right there, and I knew, if I fell apart, she wouldn't just remember the hospital and the surgery. She'd remember me, broken. So I did what I do best. I turned emotion into action. The next day, I met with the hospital social worker. We filled out the forms, we filed applications. We did what people do when they don't have rich parents, and they don't have a call from the top. At the same time, I launched a fundraiser. Yes, that one. On the platform everyone in America knows. I wrote our story the best I could. No hysteria, no theater, just facts. An 8-year-old girl, a heart, a surgery, a timeline. I didn't write Brandon's name. I didn't need to. People in our city knew who he was, and when someone recognizes themselves between the lines, it's usually louder than any direct accusation. Money started coming in slowly, then faster still. Sometimes strangers wrote, "We're not rich, but we're with you." Sometimes someone donated $5 and a heart emoji. Sometimes someone dropped 1,000 with no comment. Sometimes people brought food to my grandmother because you don't have time to think about groceries right now. Here's what's wild. Strangers were kinder than her own father. And a few days later, I finally went where I should have gone from the beginning, to legal aid. Not because I dreamed of court. I hate court. I hate paper wars. But I hate even more when someone thinks they can abandon a child and go right on living like nothing happened. The attorney looked at my documents and said what I already knew, but somehow hadn't let myself claim. In this country, a child has a right to support from both parents. Whether you want that or not, this isn't a favor. It's an obligation. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. We filed for paternity. Officially. Through the court. Not by words. Not by fairness. By law. Brandon tried to do what he does best. Vanish and hope the problem goes away. It didn't. He got served. He got calls. He got found. Because no matter how fun the party life is, you still leave traces. Addresses, paperwork, bills. I didn't celebrate it. I just did it. Because his voice was still in my head. You get nothing from me. Fine. Then I won't take it from you. I'll take, for Maddie, what she's owed. Maddie's surgery happened in time. The money came together. Assistance came through. People came through. The hospital came through. Brandon didn't. But you know what? In that moment, I didn't care who exactly saved my daughter. I cared about one thing, her heart. After surgery, Maddie became a different kid. Not in personality, in oxygen. She started running, laughing louder, asking for one more lap on the carousel. One day she simply said, "Mom, I'm not scared to breathe anymore." I went into the bathroom, shut the door, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Quietly. Quickly. Then I washed my face because shift, school, life. We started living again. Maddie kept outpacing other kids. I was proud of her in a way that felt like pride had become an organ. She won competitions. Local, statewide, then bigger ones. School came easy. She absorbed information like a sponge, and then asked questions that sent me to Google because I couldn't always keep up with my own child. In 5th grade, she got into programming. Imagine it. A kid who just stopped being afraid to breathe sits down and starts writing code because she wants to know how things work. By the time she finished high school, she was earning more than I ever had as a nurse. Not because kids these days, because Maddie was obsessed with her work, in the good way. She'd stay up all night building something because she wanted it right. In college, she and 2 friends started a tiny tech company, small, scrappy, laptops on their knees, vending machine coffee, big ideas. Then it stopped being scrappy. Then investors showed up. Then articles. Then interviews. Then Maddie started getting recognized. Sometimes I'd turn on the TV and see my daughter in a segment about young entrepreneurs, and my brain couldn't process that this was the same girl who once whispered, "Are they going to cut me?" By 30, she was a millionaire. I couldn't keep up with how fast it happened. To me, she was still Maddie, the girl with a book and that stubborn habit of finishing what she started. I didn't understand half of what she did, honestly, but I understood the important part. She did it with fire in her eyes, and it worked. Grandma. Grandma got to see it. She got very old, very small, but her mind stayed sharp. Sometimes she'd sit in her chair, watch Maddie on the news, and quietly say, "That's what I held on for." And every time my chest tightened, because Grandma, unlike Brandon, never acted like this isn't my responsibility. She just stayed. When Maddie was 10, I met David. At work. Of course, everything important in my life seemed to happen either in the hospital or around it. David tried to court me like a normal human being, but I didn't trust men back then. Brandon lived inside me like a vaccine. Charming smile, empty promises, then disappearance. It took David a long time to melt my ice. He didn't push. He didn't play games. He was just there. He did what adults do. He proved with actions that he could be trusted. We got married. We had Ava. And the most important thing, David never treated Ava and Maddie differently. He played chess with Maddie, talked to her, not like a kid, but like a person, backed her ideas, laughed at her jokes, listened when she explained how some new program worked, even though he, like me, didn't always understand. Sometimes I felt like I gave Maddie more attention, not because I loved Ava less, but because Maddie always carried that feeling in me. I owe her. I owed her for those steps, for that refusal, for that line about abortion. David said to me once, "You don't owe her anything. You've already done everything." And that might have been the strongest support I've ever heard. When Maddie grew up, she said more than once, "David taught me that normal men exist." And every time I thought, there, that's what family is. Not blood, not last names, not fairness. Choice. I tried not to think about Brandon. Most of what I learned about Brandon after that came in fragments, local news, public records, and years later, what the journalist told Maddie. I knew he was out there somewhere, living, partying, smiling for cameras. Sometimes his photos popped up because the internet loves handing you memories you never asked for, but time sorts things out. His father retired. The flow of help slowed. Brandon sulked. Not because he suddenly learned the value of work, no, because money stopped being as effortless. His father, now retired, tried his hand at business. For a while it seemed to work. Then, heart attack. And Brandon was left with a mother who'd never worked, who'd gotten used to a life where things just happen. From what I heard, when his father died, the department Brandon had been placed into didn't keep him long. They'd kept him out of respect for the old boss. When the respect left with the boss, Brandon left too. Slowly he and his mother sold off property. There was a lot. Enough to keep the pretty life going for years after that. Brandon even managed to get married and have a daughter in that time. His wife didn't stay long. No future. A marriage to a lazy, frivolous man who only knew how to take wasn't romance. It was quicksand. She left. Made him promise, at least that's how it was told to me, he'd never bother them again. And you know what's the most stunning part? And from what I could tell, Brandon was happy to keep that promise. Probably the only promise he ever kept. Then they had to sell the big house, move to an apartment, then a smaller, cheaper place. Then his mother died. And Brandon was alone, in a tiny one-bedroom, with disability checks, because one day he drove drunk and crashed. Serious injuries. According to the journalist, he later called it his lucky ticket. Otherwise, he'd have nothing to live on. According to the journalist, he had friends. Dozens. They were around as long as he had money for booze. Then they vanished. Then they came back when money showed up again. Brandon lived with a permanent grudge against the world. In his universe, everyone was at fault. Women who demand, parents who didn't give enough, kids who were turned against him, a world that didn't appreciate him. Just not him. His own daughter, the one from his marriage, wanted nothing to do with him. He said she'd been brainwashed. Of course, someone always brainwashes. It's never possible that a person simply remembers who you are. So there was one thing left: alcohol. I didn't find out a journalist had tracked Brandon down until Maddie told me. This is how Maddie told it to me, mostly through what the journalist told her. Once Maddie became known, people wrote about her constantly. Interviews, articles, podcasts. And one day, some journalist decided Maddie deserved a book. Inspirational. For teenagers. About starting from nothing and making it. He dug into family history. Realized David wasn't her biological father. And of course, he wanted to find the real one. He found Brandon. When he showed up, the journalist said Brandon was a sad picture. A man drinking himself into nothing, unemployed, surviving on small disability payments. The journalist started asking questions. Brandon tried to spin it. I have a daughter, but we don't talk. The journalist kept talking about a child, not saying the name. Brandon, of course, had heard about the young tech millionaire, even envied her. But he didn't connect it. And then it clicked. Maddie was that little girl, the one I'd begged money for, the one he'd told to abort. She survived. And she became a millionaire. Brandon grabbed his head. Even in his decline, he understood. After everything, Maddie wasn't exactly going to run into his arms. But in his mind, a different machine started up. Not regret, not guilt, profit. She could solve all my problems. It wouldn't cost her anything. He started talking about lawyers, about laws, about how adult kids have to support their parents. The fantasies of a man who'd spent his entire life thinking the world owed him. The journalist looked at him and said something close to what I told Maddie on the steps years ago, just with different words. If I were her, I wouldn't even want to know you exist. Brandon asked, tired. Then what do you want from me? The journalist answered honestly. I'm writing a book. I always try to understand the people in the story. Maybe your example will help someone make the right choice. And then he added, like the final nail, this story is a ready-made parable. The moral is simple. You don't abandon your children. The journalist left. According to the journalist, Brandon stayed at the table. It hurt him. And the funniest part, if anything in this is funny, wasn't because he suddenly understood how much pain he caused. It was because he realized how much money he'd lost. He pulled a half-finished bottle from the cabinet and drank straight from it. When Maddie told me, I stayed quiet for a long time. Not because I felt sorry for him, because I felt this strange calm. Life doesn't always punish in a neat cinematic way. Sometimes it punishes slowly, with empty rooms, with money bleeding out, with people leaving because you made leaving the only option. Maddie was right there, alive, healthy, strong. And I told her what I should have told her a long time ago, and myself too. You don't owe anyone anything, especially the person who chose nothing. She smiled. I know, Mom. And that, I think, is the best ending. Not his downfall, her life. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please subscribe and give this video a like. And if you feel comfortable, share your thoughts in the comments. I read them. Your support truly means a lot. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.